G'day, thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday the 12th of March 2026 and our topics this week are Fortnightly rubbish collection. Is it inevitable that it's going to come to an end? The weekly rubbish collection, is it going to end? I would mourn the loss of it. Anyway, we'll get started. I have a lot of feelings about this. And Australia can't easily reduce its military dependence on the US, but we might have a Canadian mitigation strategy. This is sort of a bit of a thought experiment. Of course, we have our 2 Ticks Down talk, and then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History, and we'll finish off, as always, with the 4X bottle top trivia. But before we get into all of that, let's catch up with the last week. Ardeet, hello. What have you been up to?
G'day, DK. Well, as you know, because I was a little bit late starting, I thought I'd let the mates of the podcast know. I was just running around. I was actually in a little bit of blue ass fly mode, thinking I had time that I didn't have, and was just about ready there. And then I got a text from the neighbour. And I had given her some, or Mrs. Ardeet and myself had given her some veggies and that, and also I said pineapples again. I said pineapples when I was some passion fruit a couple of days ago, and I looked down and thought, it's my neighbour. I'll have a quick check of it. And she said, got time to meet me at the fence for some cake, and I thought, my understanding co-host DK will say, if you're going for cake, I can wait a couple of minutes until we start. So she's given me it's a good 80 degrees of cake of this really beautiful passion fruit, looks like passion fruit sponge type of thing. I've sort of basically run out. Sorry, got to be rude, but I'm just about to do the podcast. That's wonderful, and I thought, excellent, because I thought I'll have that for dessert after tonight. So yeah, she's a good cook. So I'm she's got the country cook capability. So it's all just spot on. I've had her stuff before. So yeah, that was a good start to the Savo. But food wise, what wasn't a good start on Tuesday. Mrs. Ardeet was away, and I thought, I had a bit of rib roast that had been in the freezer. I thought, I'm going to try an experiment with that. So I put that in. I had it in the sous vide, and it was going for several hours, because I thought I'm going to really just hammer it with the sous vide, see how I get some tenderness in there. And I thought, because it's a sous vide, I don't need to put it on the rotisserie, rotisserie rack thing. I thought I can just put it in there on high temperature, get the outside right, and the inside will be cooked. So I had set my alarm to go off after whatever it was, 20 minutes or something, because I thought I'd have plenty of time. Bad move. I had it just sitting on the foil tray on top of the, this is in my Weber queue, on top of the open grates, which I normally have. But I did have it on high. I thought, I'll just keep it cranked up on high. But what's obviously happened is that the fat has fallen onto things and built up. And I sort of opened the door to have a look at it, and there's bloody flames coming out of it, like not good flames, but bad flames, bad flames coming out of the Weber queue. And shit, when turned it all off and had a look, and then I felt the back of it just went clunk down partially. So I actually it got so hot it melted some of the plastic supports at the back underneath it. So I was able to prop it up, and luckily that I had set the timer, because if I'd been 15 minutes later, it would have just been basically a black charred thing. So the meat actually turned out all right. I was happy with that, but my technique was absolute rubbish, and now I've slightly rooted the Weber queue. So I had a look at it. I think I can sort of do a bit of a workaround patch, throw some supports under there. But yeah, I wasn't particularly happy about that one. I was happy that it didn't go badly, a bit frustrated that I stuffed up and burned it. But it was an interesting experiment, which I won't be repeating in that way before. I think probably I need to put it on the rotisserie or turn off the middle burner if I'm just going to sit it on the tray. So. Yeah, that was a surprise, opening the door and seeing bloody yellow. And, of course, it scorched all the bottom of my beautiful-looking Weber Q and, got so hot that it's, peeled off some of that that enamel paint that was on the outside.
Oh, yeah.
So it's looking...
Don't eat that.
No. It's looking like it's gone through the wars, but, you got to try these things sometimes, and sometimes you got to learn.
So you only learn sometimes by making mistakes, as they say. It's always an opportunity to learn, but
yeah,
what about it still sucks. It still sucks. It's been very wet here. I did promise an update. Cyclone didn't turn into a cyclone, thankfully, but boy, did it rain like it was. So. Of course, cyclones are measured by their wind speed as opposed to how much water they hold. And whilst this was not windy, boy, did it rain. And it rained and it rained. I think we got about just over 200 millimeters of rain over 3 days.
Well, that's a lot of rain.
It's a lot of rain. It's a huge amount of rain. Some local flooding just from the rainwater sort of building up before it can flow out. All of our drains here locally flow out to the sea, particularly when there was high tide. Some of those drains outflows are sort of underwater, so unless there's the pressure behind them, they're not really going to flow properly. So there was a little bit of localized flooding, but nothing major. Unfortunately, there was some absolutely massive flooding in the surrounding area, and a couple of the big rivers flooded. I know Bundaberg, the city of Bundaberg, which isn't too far from me, flooded pretty significantly, which is a real shame. So our thoughts are with those people as they're sort of recovering. There is more rain on the way, unfortunately. Thankfully, it's not much. It probably over the sort of tomorrow and the weekend we'll get. So by the time you're listening to this, it will be raining. But we're only going to get probably collectively maybe 20 mil or something like that over the weekend. So nothing too crazy, but it definitely sort of adds insult to injury, particularly when you're trying to clean out and everything like that. So. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's frustrating. It could have been a hell of a lot worse for us, but it is frustrating because with that much rain, it slows a lot of things down. We had a lot of panic buying locally because one of the major roads got cut off, and people just naturally freak out when that happens.
As mates of the podcast know that we have pointed. In fact, I think in the last would have been doing this for 2.5 years or something in this current format, we must have pointed out at least 3 times, possibly more, but at least 3 times that thing of how people go into the panic buying, and at the time it's happening is not the time to be getting your supplies.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It really isn't. And I had the forethought to stock up on some food at the end of last week. We were fine. We didn't need to go to the shops. I very specifically was like, I would like to avoid going out if we can because simple facts, local roads were flooding. Not a great idea to be out in the weather if you can avoid it. A lot of places were closed. Lots of fuel stations were rationing fuel, not just because of the weather event, but also because of the global geopolitical situation we find ourselves in these days. Lots of people
how are they doing that? The rationing. Sorry, just like what's the mechanics of that they're doing up there? How are they enforcing it? Or
some fuel stations had just turned Bowsers off, particularly diesel. So you'd grab the diesel and there was just nothing coming out. There was fuel in the tank, but they weren't selling it to. They were only selling it to like emergency services vehicles and things like that.
Right. Okay.
Another one I saw just had a piece of paper that said on it you can only have up to 100 liters. That's it. So I
What are
don't
they
know.
going to do if you put in more than 100?
I
Force
don't-
you to siphon it out?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I was like, are they watching? Because I know they can see on the screens when it gets so high, or maybe they've pre-programmed them to automatically cut off or something
click
like
off.
that.
Yeah, maybe.
Not 100% sure. Thankfully, I didn't need to buy fuel when I'm trying to avoid going too many places to buy fuel while it is so expensive. So,
What's your diesel cost up there at the moment?
let me have a quick look. I'll tell you live on air. What's the diesel cost around here?
Because I filled up this morning, because I know you're normally cheaper up there. I filled up this morning and it was $2.35 for a litre, which I can't remember what that is in gallons. I think you multiply it by something close to 4, so close to $9 a gallon in the US gallon. But yeah, about $2.35 is what I was paying for a litre. This is what I paid for a litre this morning. I got my 4 cents discount and another couple of cents discount, but that was what the official price was.
Yeah, currently it's actually jumped up today, so it's $1.45.5 is the cheapest that I can find locally, and generally it is cheaper here.
God, that's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, So I'm just going to work this out. So if we did $1.45, sorry, $2.45.
Yeah. Using the price down here. That's 90 cents difference between us down here in Victoria and up there in Queensland. I know there's a difference in some of the taxes, etc., but that's quite a big difference.
Oh, no, it's $2.45.5 here.
Sorry, it's $2.45.
Yeah, $2.45, sorry.
I say not $1.35.
No. Oh my gosh, $1.35. No.
I thought that's what you said,
$1.35. No, it is what I said. I misspoke, sorry. It's $2.45 here at the minute. So that is, for our American listeners, that works out to be $9.27 a gallon.
Wow.
Which
God, that's worse than California.
I know they're whinging as $4.50 a gallon or something like that. So you got nothing to whinge about, mate.
No, bloody hell.
So yeah, it's expensive. So yeah, but look, I've got enough for now. So I'm trying to avoid. Hopefully things will settle down.
Yeah,
but yeah,
hopefully
the fuel situation isn't great. Anyway. Speaking of things that aren't great, let's move on. The rising costs of waste management is the excuse. Fortnightly rubbish. Is it inevitable? I hate this topic. I'm just going to let you know straight up. I feel very strongly about this. Fortnightly rubbish collection is inevitable across Melbourne as more councils consider reducing pickups while grappling with the rising costs of waste, environmental concerns, and looming deadlines to roll out glass recycling bins. 1 in 3 councils have already reduced rubbish collection to every second week, and even more are considering the shift 7 years after then Premier Dan Andrews declared it a rubbish idea without and the one that would never happen under a Labor government. That's right. Somehow this is all Dan Andrews' fault. 26 of Victoria's 79 councils collect general rubbish fortnightly, whilst White Horse and Brimbank recently considered the change but decided to keep it to weekly collection for now. The Municipal Association of Victoria expects even more councils will consider following suit, while waste management expert Trevor Thornton said that the shift to fortnightly collections was inevitable to cut costs. Under Mary Beck's proposal, the standard red lid rubbish bin would increase from 80 litres to 120 litres, while certain households like those with multiple children in nappies could get bigger bins for free. There would be no change to other bin collections, including food and garden organics, which are currently picked up weekly. Speaking about the Marybeck Council, they have already rolled out 4th bins to collect glass recycling, but other councils have until July 2027. This is a mandate that sparked backlash from 35 councils instead. want the state government to expand the container deposit scheme instead, which actually, in my mind, makes more sense. Modelling commissioned by some of the opposing councils last year, which had not publicly been released, and I could not find a copy of it publicly, estimated that glass bins would cost an extra $4 million a year, with an average increase of $27 per household waste charges. I'm sure most people wouldn't be happy spending $27 a year more just to recycle glass and have an extra bin. In fact, I think a lot of people would be against this just for the fact of the space an extra bin takes up.
Yep.
But anyway, meanwhile, in the city of Rockingham, south of Perth in Western Australia, the topic of bin collection has been a viral point of discussion since the council's food, organics and garden organics rollout last year. FOGO bins, they call them. Councillors reported went head-to-head with furious locals over smelly and messy bins during a council meeting earlier this week after a motion to reinstate a weekly red bin collection was defeated. This is despite residents reporting an increase of flies, maggots and overflowing bins since collection was reduced to fortnightly.
And that was just in the council meeting.
That was just in the council meeting. And a petition with over 6,800 signatures, which is a lot of people, supporting the issue, has now sparked plenty of online outrage, which is why we're talking about it, because I am outraged on their behalf. Some residents have even resorted to using public bins in parks and beaches to dump their extra waste, which is not surprising at all, quite frankly. So, much like the content of the story, it appears that the whole situation is a bit of a mess, with residents unhappy, lots of waste and rising costs. I have a couple of questions for you. Do you still have the large wheelie bins, the 120 litre wheelie bins? And are you on weekly or fortnightly pickups? And then I also want to know your thoughts of this in general. And would you be happy to pay extra if your local council said we're going to fortnightly, but you can pay, I don't know, a certain amount of money to have it continue to be weekly? Would you be happy with that? Or are you not a big waste? You don't make a lot of waste. So throwing a lot at you, but what do you think?
Oh, look, I could probably get away with a monthly collection in probably a half size 40 litre bin. Really, if we no, God, the amount of smugness that came out with this topic of people saying, "Oh, well, I only use this amount of." Look, okay, well, start that you did throw a whole lot there. No, look, we have a. How do I feel about it? First off, I'm really frustrated that we continue to move down this path of constantly clipping the coin and ratcheting down services. Now, I get there's inflation. I understand that costs go up and all and everything, but that's also related to government policy, and it continually comes back and bloody bites the taxpayer in the arse. And this is just another example of it, because the councils are getting less money. They're getting more things thrown onto them by the state governments, who are getting more things thrown onto them by the federal government. So it has this cascading effect throughout it, and it's. Look, I do understand that you compare it to, and I hate this thing, it's a first world problem, because I think, well, yeah, okay, it is in many ways, but it's my problem. So I appreciate that the idea of having regular rubbish collections to some parts of the world is just incredibly luxurious. But that's what we've got. That's what we have been given. That's what we've, we're essentially, that was the deal. You pay your rates. You get someone to take away your rubbish. I noticed in there that it had the thing about bigger bins, actually, which I'll get to in a tick. So to me, it's just another thing of finding another Weasley way to break the deal. I mean, people come back with this thing of, and I get this a lot of the time, because I sort of, in a lot of political arguments, I'll lean more towards the pro-libertarian side, and people will come back and say, oh, we've got a social contract, and I won't get started on that, but it goes both ways. So if you want to go down that way, there's also a social contract with the the politicians of, now listen, this is what we agreed to. And in answer to your other question, we've got an 80 litre bin. The recycling, which ours is a mixture of glass and paper and aluminium, is the what did you say the big size is? 120, was it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got a green waste, which we pay for. That was an extra that we wanted to get, even though we sort of try and keep a whole lot of organic stuff on there. If you're pulling out blackberries and that, don't always want to be paying a tip fee. It was actually a reasonable price. I can't remember. It's something like that. I don't know, $200 a year or something like that. It might even be a bit less. But you get the big 120 litre bin for that, and that's all we've got with the three bins. I feel like the deal is the recycling that we're all. It's like we had the rubbish, and then they wanted to go down this line of, well, no, we've got to recycle, we've got to do these other things. I think, okay, fair enough. Let's go along with that for a bit. I can see some sense in that, mainly on the glass and the aluminium. The rest of it, I'm sceptical about, but I thought, okay, we'll do that. And then it was sort of, okay, and then we've got the green waste there, and then now them trying to put in another one, it's like, so that we can also all take this away from the amount of rubbish that's going in there. So we'll give you a smaller bin. And now it's like we've ratcheted you down on this smaller bin. Oh, and now we're going to take out this weekly service. And I think it's a reasonable comment from people. Look, ours is seldom completely full, but it's more than it's about 2/3, which means if we were doing a fortnightly one, we'd be slightly overflowing or having to jam it down in there, which sometimes you jam it down and the truck doesn't empty it properly. But I look at some of the families around, you can see their lids sticking up, and if the cockies or the ravens don't get to it, you're sort of lucky, so you get a bit of stuff going there. And there is some of that stuff of, look, we've used the kitchen bags, so it's sealed, but not everyone can do that. Not everyone wants to do that. So you do get some of these health issues going along with it. In terms of would I pay for it, like if they came down our way, if they said, listen, you're only getting a fortnightly one unless you pay, I would probably be paying for it. And I would be doing that primarily because there's a whole lot of stuff that, particularly in summer, I don't want fermenting in my bin. You can open it up, and even if you've got nicely wrapped in the plastic, it still makes for a pongy area, and I just don't like the idea of meat going rancid in the bin for 2 weeks, or thinking, oh well, I better plan my meal so I don't have anything awful going in there for more than a week. So I would pay for a fortnightly. A weekly collection if they went down there. I wouldn't be happy about it because I don't think that's the deal. The bigger bin that they were talking about, I can sort of understand that being a thing of, well, this might be a bit of a workaround, but again, it's just a bureaucratic workaround, and my bottom line is, no, sorry, stick with what you said. So, yeah, there's a couple of other points there, but let me hear what you think. So same questions to you. What size bin do you have? How many bins do you have? What do you think of this idea? Maybe lead in with that. And would you pay for a weekly service if you had that option, if you were forced onto the 2 weekly?
All right, so I'm going to blow your mind here. I've actually just looked it up because I was like, I don't know how big our bins actually are. So I went on to my local council's website. We've got 240 litre bins.
Oh, is that the big one? Okay.
That's the big one, yeah. I thought that was 120, but obviously it's not. So we've got the quote-unquote full-size 240 litre bins. We've two. We just have the red lid which is general waste, and then recycling, which is mixed recycling. So that's glass, aluminium, well, any metal, and paper and cardboard. So you just chuck it all in one bin. We do, here in Queensland, we do have the Containers for Change program. So you get 10 cents for cans and bottles, like drink containers, basically, which we do as well. So our recycling bin is fortnightly, and generally it's not fully full at the end of the fortnight, mostly because all of the drink containers are put into a separate, I've got a big box that probably once a month we go and take that and do that. Before, it was generally pretty full. So I wouldn't mind having a weekly recycling pickup. That would be fine. That doesn't bother me. The rubbish, though, our bin generally is not completely full by the end of the week, but if we did it fortnightly, it would be overflowing. And part of that is definitely like, oh yes, we've got a big bin, so we can make waste and it doesn't matter, and we can put things in there and so on and so forth. Probably some of the stuff we'd put in our bin, other people would take to the dump separately, and so on and so forth. So if you live in a metro area going like, oh, that's more what it is. I probably don't make that much waste. We don't have a green waste bin, but our local council does let us dump green waste for free. So
okay.
It doesn't bother me at all. I would actually prefer that, because often if we're making enough green waste that we would need a separate bin for it, it's probably enough green waste that, like, I'm clearing out the garden and I need to grab the trailer and then I'm going to load it up and I'm going to take it to the tip anyway. So for me, the green waste bin isn't really that useful. Lots of people like to compost locally and all that. There's lots of ways you can mitigate your waste and so on and so forth. It bothers me a lot having this where I'm paying for a service and now they're cutting it because, it's getting too expensive. A bit like what you said, it's getting expensive because you guys are making it more expensive by continuously adding, let's get rid of this, or let's add this, it's going to be better for this, and so on and so forth. And like, I'm not against progress, but there is a point where I do think it gets a little bit out of control. Other parts of the world that I've lived in do like Germany is pretty extreme in their recycling. G'day to all of our Germans and Europeans that know exactly what I mean. Where they very much break it down into, I think, and I'm going to get crucified when I get this wrong, but it's like glass, metal. I can't remember if you have to separate aluminium for the other metals. I'm not sure. It's been a while. It's been over 10 years since I was in Germany. So, but I think it was soft plastics and hard plastics as well. So you did have to separate everything out. And it was a big deal. Like, do not cock this up, And then when I was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, they did a situation where you had to buy, they didn't have a bin. This was in Auckland City. They had these bags that you would purchase from the supermarket, and they weren't cheap. They were like $1 each or something like that. They were like big rubbish bags, and you'd put them in, and then you just put them out on the curb, and they would have the guys come and pick them up and throw them in there. But you had to
for general rubbish.
Yeah, for general rubbish. But you had to specifically buy those bags. They wouldn't pick up any other bags. And
so
they were
you didn't actually have a wheelie bin or anything.
No. And they had
were they
guys
heavy duty bags?
Yeah, they were pretty heavy duty. I could imagine if you filled it up though, it could probably burst. I didn't think it was a particularly good system, but I guess it employs more people. I know in parts of America they do the same thing where they've got guys hanging off the back of the truck rather than the trucks we have here. Have a claw. There's just a guy in the cab. They have a claw. They grab the bin and it tips up into the back of the truck, so no one gets out of the truck or anything like that. Which you'd think would keep the costs down, but apparently not.
Well, we've got that claw thing. Interestingly, up at my parents' place up in Sydney where they live, there's I suppose there's so much parking on the street that they just have runner garbos, like the actual garbos off the back of the thing, because it's just you'd never get a truck. You'd be doing a claw through, and the amount of money you'd be spending on reimbursing people for scratch cars, it's obviously worth it doing the blokes on the back of the truck.
That makes sense. The other question I have is, would you be against the council having like council-owned bins, like big skip bins in like a convenient location, but you have to pay to use them? So you can take your household waste there and make it, affordable, maybe a 50 cents a bag or something like that. And you chuck it in there. Would that be something that you'd be against if the councils are going in this direction of cutting down? Because you may be able to adapt to it on a regular basis, but there's always going to be times like Christmas or you have friends over. Yeah. There's always times when you're making more waste. And what I think we need to be really careful here with this idea of, the local council can save money by cutting back on its waste pickup, is that people will find other ways to get rid of it.
As in chuck it out the window or just dump it.
Illegal dumping is a big problem in Australia already, and a lot of councils understand this, and as a result, they do have reasonably affordable tip costs. You can take a trailer load for $10 or whatever it might be in the local area, but generally it is quite affordable. But people still don't pay that, and they still go dump it in the bush and stuff like that. I think that problem is going to get exacerbated if we do this, or people will start burning it in other things. So, which we don't want people to do either. So, I do feel like this is a bit of a you really have to walk this tightrope of inconveniencing people, but also trying to educate them to not make as much waste. And I think that this could go either way. But a potential solution I could see is having like council-owned bins in like a shopping center or something like that, where you're going to go there anyway, just take your rubbish with you, chuck it in the bin, problem solved. That's a potential solution. But
I reckon you definitely, in answer to your question, I think something like that would probably be if they were going down this thing of ratcheting back the services, something like that would be well and truly worth trialing, because I think there's if it's somewhere where you're going to go anyway, you sort of think, okay, fine, I can chuck it into the car, and you do sort of see you do have to go with the human incentive. Like the 10 cents for the containers works well, because it's enough that you sort of think, it's worthwhile chucking in. Like Mrs. Ardeet's got it; she's into it more than I am. But she's got me on board with it. So she's just got a big sort of baskety type thing. All the 10 cent things goes in there, and when she's heading down that way for something to do, for something to pick up down the street, she'll chuck that in the car. Run that through. Yeah, it's a couple of bucks in the account. She feels happy that she's done that, and I think, okay, well, fine. She's keen to do that. I also noticed too, our tips, where we get 3 free vouchers a year that covers you. Each of the vouchers covers you for a metre of, green waste. Don't know what else it covers you for, but certainly a metre of green waste. But most of the other stuff is maybe it covers rubbish as well. I can't remember. I don't sort of do a hell of a lot of that. But there's a lot of stuff that they worked out. It's just going to be paying for dumping. Like mattresses, you can just take for free to the tip. Now, when you had to pay for them, you'd see mattresses dumped in a lot of places. Rarely do I see that. There's things like, paint and oil, metal, a whole lot of stuff like that, which they were like actually take and recycle, and it's free just down to the tip. And I feel like over the years, I've noticed a real reduction in the amount of stuff being dumped. So I think there is certainly that incentive. And if you had something like you suggested, where it was a nominal fee, like okay, it's $1 from a bag of rubbish. We had a party last night, got a couple of them. Yep, I'm happy to do it, rather than just sort of think, I'll just dump it somewhere. So yeah, I would support that.
Yeah, I think that's a potential solution. But like I said, it is a fine line because the mattress thing is actually a really good example. Here locally, I think they're like $40 to drop off a mattress. And they are one of the most frequently dumped things you see around is a dirty, scungy old mattress just dumped in the bush, or you'll see the remnants of a mattress that someone has dumped and then set on fire. And neither of those are great. And the reality is that I understand they are a biohazard and they treat them that way, and there is a big cost and so on and so forth. But the reality is fewer people are doing the right thing with them because there's that barrier of costs essentially. So I think this is one of these ones where you've got to walk that tightrope, and if you keep making it difficult for people, if you do make it fortnightly, if you do reduce the rubbish bin size continuously down, people are just going to find other ways. Very rarely are you actually going to completely change their behavior. I haven't seen the scientific literature on this, but that is my gut feeling, is that people won't change their ways. They'll just start burning it. They'll start illegally dumping it, or, people that don't want to do the wrong thing, they'll just take it to the tip otherwise. They'll just have another bin that they fill up, and when it's full, they'll go and take that down, and they'll get rid of it that way. I don't think you're reducing the amount of waste. I think you're just reducing the cost. And where do we go from here? What's next,
Yep.
Oh, we do it once a month. Like, at what point are you just going to cut it away completely, and then we'll have some enterprising young fella go, oh, I'm going to start a Garbo thing locally, and we're just going to start again, The market will respond to it, and before you know it, because I'll tell you what, though, your rates don't go down when they cut services.
No, Like, they came out and they said, look, this is what we're doing. Not everybody seems to need it. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut everybody's rates by this amount. And if you need to pay to get yours weekly, then your rates are effectively then you're still going to be paying the same amount. I could think, oh, okay, I can see some logic in there. That's some incentive for humans. But when it's sort of like, oh, and your rates are going up.
Yeah. You're getting less, you're paying more. You just go, well, what the hell, incredibly frustrating, and unfortunately, just something that seems to keep happening. Shrinkflation, it affects services as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. It's time for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had.
All right, this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, we're heading to the western side of the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, just off the Flinders Highway, to the small seaside town of Streaky Bay. The town of Streaky Bay is a major population centre and is the capital district of Streaky Bay. And it is very much the heart of the agricultural farming district, which focuses mostly on cereal crops and a little bit of sheep, as well as having a fairly well-established fishing and tourism industry as well. Some good waves, I have been told. But for thousands of years, the area around Streaky Bay was inhabited by the Wirangu people. The first recorded European sighting, though, was made by a Dutchman, Peter Nutz, in, do you want to guess, Ardeet, what year he was there?
Oh, the Dutch. That's a funny one. They got, I think Dirk Hartog might have been a Dutch bloke. He was. He was. Yeah, I'm going to take a guess that it was first sighted in 1690.
Ooh, it is in the 1600s, 1627.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very early in terms of European exploration.
Wow, 1627.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. He was in the Golden Zipard, which is the Golden Seahorse. But it wasn't until nearly 2 centuries later, in 1802, that Captain Matthew Flinders rediscovered the area and named it Streaky Bay whilst he was examining the South Australian coast.
That's amazing, isn't it? I'm sorry to jump in there, but I hear these sometimes, and you're saying nearly 2 centuries later, and it's just almost unfathomable. But you sort of forget, how much of an adventure, or how difficult it was to go out there, and how unknown it was, and it was still being discovered, and communication was, hundreds of times slower than what you've got now. And there was probably someone sort of thinking, wow, we've got here already. That's not a bad effort. That's but 200 years.
It is. It's significantly long time. But again, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. The distances traveled were significant. Even in Flinders' case, the establishment of the colonies was well underway by that point. But even Sydney to sail around from Sydney Harbour down sort of around through the Bight and come up to this area of Streaky Bay it's a bloody long way, especially in the age of sail. So his ship was called the Investigator, which I think is very apt. And he's the one that gave it the name Streaky Bay, and it's because of the streaks in the water that we believe was to do with reflection of light and possibly the seaweed in the local area. It does seem to be not 100% agreed on exactly what was causing the streaks in the bay itself, on the water and on the beach, but it's definitely something to do with the seaweed and the light, we think.
So you don't see it nowadays?
I think you do on certain tides and certain like blooms of seaweed and things like that. I think you can sort of get streaks in the water. But his captain's logs very specifically said the 5th of February 1802, it said, quote, "And the water was much discoloured with streaks. So I called it Streaky Bay." End quote. I just love it. Yeah. I love that so much because, I guess for these guys as well, like you would have to have, you would get sort of a fatigue of coming up with names for all these places that you were discovering, because a lot of these places, they were, people like Matthew Flinders, they discovered a lot and they had to name a lot. And so, you'd just be like, what am I going to call this place? I
call this Rocky Point.
Exactly.
Inspired, sir.
So if we fast forward a few more years, on the 25th of August, 1839, Edward John Eyre, who explored overland from Port Lincoln, arrived at the locality, and he established a small base about 3 kilometres from what is now the Streaky Bay town, which he used as a store for his overland expedition to Point Bell. This site became known as Eyre's Watering Hole, and it has been preserved, and you can see it today. It is just off the road to Point Kenny in the local area. It is one of the sites to see. There's not much to see, but it's there. From 1850 to 1860, a whaling station was established and operated near the local Point Brown, and it's believed that these whalers were most likely the first European settlers to remain in the area for any sort of length of time. The country around Streaky Bay was opened up by pastoralists around 1854 and from then on, with the biggest station being called Maryvale. It comprised 470 square kilometres, which is absolutely huge. This run represented the pick of grazing lands where water was available at a shallow depth, because this is a pretty arid area. We've spoken about the Eyre Peninsula before, but it it really is quite arid. As these lands were opened up and more people came to the area, the establishment of a town was necessary. And in the 1870s, a small oyster factory was established in now the small town of Streaky Bay. So, and they canned oysters for export. Call me a purist, but canned oysters, doesn't sound great. But
I have had them before. We were in the country that was sort of what you'd get sometimes. I'm talking 70s, late 70s,
1870s. Yep.
Yeah, 1870s. That's right. I'm 150 years old. They're not. I don't think I ever would go back to them.
No, I don't think, there's a reason they're not.
Yeah.
They're not everywhere. Streaky Bay, originally the town was actually called Flinders. Ugh, of course it was. But in the 1940s, because the locals didn't call it Flinders, they called it Streaky Bay. So the name was actually officially changed back to Streaky Bay, which I like. I like that idea that the locals were like, no, we're not naming it after another thing after Matthew Flinders. Like, far out. It's bad enough that he named the bay Streaky Bay. But at least it's unique. It's unique.
Just go along Flinders Point, just past Flinders Road, and then you'll see the turn off to Flinders.
Basically. There was conflict in the local area with the settlers and the Aboriginal people. There were killings on both sides of the conflict. But there was a significant event that happened nearby in the Waterloo Bay, which is sort of about 10 Ks sort of south of it's actually probably closer to 20 Ks south of Streaky Bay, where there was a bit of a massacre of Aboriginal people in the late 1840s, which was probably more the whalers came into contact and sort of conflict with them rather than the pastoralists. But it's also a bit of a contentious event on exactly how many people were killed on both sides. It seems that at least 5 European settlers were killed, but the number of Aboriginals that were killed is very much up for debate. Some accounts say that it was only 5 that were killed, though there are estimates that are up to 260 were killed by the 1880s. So look, I can't speak for incomplete history, and I don't want to go too much into this because this isn't specifically what this Two Ticks Town Talk is about, but I feel like I'd be amiss if I didn't mention the grisly past with the Indigenous people of the area. It was absolutely disgusting and unfortunately a fairly common subject in small town Australia. As we've seen time and time again, as settlers came to settle areas, the local people weren't too happy about it, and rightfully so, quite frankly. And so conflicts did arise. Today, Streaky Bay is a pretty busy agricultural and fishing hub. That's sort of the heart of local industry. The local economy is absolutely dominated by wheat, barley, and other cereal grain production, as well as sheep. And olives are a new addition to the area as it has a Mediterranean climate. It's very similar, I believe, to parts of like the Greek islands and things like that. It's also quite arid, like a lot of those areas as well. So olives, in my mind, kind of seem like the perfect crop, but they do take a long time to establish, and maybe that's why they've been reluctant to do it in the past. The area is also surrounded by excellent surf beaches, which are popular with the locals and tourists chasing good swells and good times, I imagine. Though the Australian Bight is notoriously full of great white sharks, so, at your own peril, I've been great.
Yeah, the slight downside.
Yeah, I've been great white shark, cage diving just off the coast there. And yeah, they're there. So, take your precautions and all those things. Right. Enough about Streaky Bay. The real reason I wanted to talk about this place is because of the weird rocks that were nearby. That's right. This was a two-tick rock talk all along.
Oh, damn. He sucked us in again.
I gotcha.
Another one of these weird bloody rock ones.
I did have to pad this out because there really isn't much to talk about these rocks. And funnily enough, when I was looking for a topic, as I've said so many times before, oftentimes I just open Google Maps and I just start looking around and see what sort of pops up. I spend a lot of time. I waste a lot of time, I should say, doing this before I settle on a place. And honestly, what took my fancy with Streaky Bay was just it's got a weird name. Like, it's just interesting. Like, what's the deal with that? And it does look like a really, really beautiful place. So, no disrespect for the locals of Streaky Bay. One day I'll get to the Eyre Peninsula and I will definitely pop in. Well, I've been there. I've been to Port Lincoln before, but I want to get over to that side of the Eyre Peninsula as well. But I had to pad this out because there's not a lot to talk to about these rocks, but they look really cool, and so I wanted to talk about them. So the local legend goes that once upon a time there was a traveller that was travelling along the road who asked their driver how the local farmer had grown so much wheat, as they could see these huge piles, haystacks, piled over 8 meters high, these massive stacks of hay. The driver laughed and said, "That's not hay, these are rocks, and they're located on the Murphy family's property on their farm." But the name sort of stuck, and today we call these rocks Murphy's haystacks. They were carved by wind and time, these pink granite pillars. Basically, big. Oh,
okay.
Big boulders.
Sorry, I've just clicked the link that you've, and this will be in the show notes. I can see that.
It definitely looks, from a distance, you could understand how these could be mistaken for a large haystack. But these large pink granite pillars, the boulders, they hold great cultural significance for the Wirangu people, the traditional custodians of the land, and of course, the local people there today as well. For thousands of years, the area around the rocks was an important site for storytelling and connection to country, with the unique rock formations inspiring indigenous legends and traditions. They're basically big weathered granite outcrops. They are made of pink, massive, coarsely equigranular rock, which in layman's terms just means rocks that are made of equal size pieces of like their constituent rocks. They are mostly made of quartz and orthoclase. Their appearance may be due to a combination of erosion by underground rainwater and then subsequent weathering after they were exposed. Interestingly, most of the pillars emerge without breaking from the underlying granite under the ground. And according to C.R. Twydale and Elizabeth Campbell in the Transactions of the Royal Society of South Australia, they said, quote, "They could be remnants modified by subsurface moisture attack of massive convex upward sheets of rock," end quote.
Oh, that would have been my first guess.
Yeah, so there you go. If you're doing a PhD in geology and you need a thesis subject, feel free to get around to Streaky Bay to find out about Murphy's haystacks and what exactly they are. I would love for you to excavate them and find out what's going on, because apparently the science isn't quite settled yet. I would encourage you, as Ardeet said, to have a look in the show notes, as always, to see what these rocks look like, because they're pretty cool. Like, they're a bit sort of weird, particularly because they're just like, I feel like it looks like some giant just dropped like a bag of marbles into a field or something.
Yeah, but they got that skinny look. Like they're almost like it's almost like the bottom of it's like a marble. It's sort of been squeezed and it's just sort of popped up through the top of your hand. So you've still got that that neck around there, but it's sticking out at the top. Like they're not. It's not quite a light globe. It's almost like a. It's almost spherical at the top, but connected by a thick neck. They're a weird-looking rock.
They are weird. They are weird, and they're also sort of covered in like moss and lichen, which kind of really blends into the landscape.
Quite beautiful, really.
They are. I think they're really beautiful. But you're right. They're weathered in such a way that they're almost like mushroom-like in some ways.
Oh, mushroom! God, that's a better description.
Yeah, and one of them does have quite a significant overhang as well. But they're just out in a field. They're unusual because they're unique in their landscape. They seem so out of place compared to a lot of the other things we've talked about. They're just there, and there's sort of nothing else like it. You'd understand if there was a huge amount of them, but they're not. There's just a handful of them, and they're just sort of there. The good news is you can go and visit them. They are on private property, but there is no cost to access them. The Murphy family still owns the property, as I understand it, and they have opened it to public access. There is free public access, and there is even a toilet on site as well. So get out there, grab your surfboard, head down to Streaky Bay, see some more of this incredible country, sample the local culture and sites, food. I'm sure there's probably amazing seafood in the district around there.
Olive oils, oysters, uncanned.
Uncanned or canned if you prefer. I'm sure someone somewhere has a 150-year-old can of oysters.
That's still right. It hasn't swollen up yet.
It's fine. So thank you for listening to another Two Ticks Rock Talk on Weird Rocks, this time in Streaky Bay, South Australia on the Eyre Peninsula. Get out there and see more of this beautiful country.
Yeah. It's interesting how they just sort of like popped up. Like
almost grew out of the ground, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
That was a better description of yours, the mushroom or the fungus type of thing, those ones that are sort of not your typical mushroom shape, but those ones that you see toadstools that are still got the big head on it. But so, yeah, that's interesting. I also, too, just had look up, when we're talking about that, 200 years, they went and they explored there, and then 200 years later, they're starting to establish it there. I did think, I'll just check the dates, and it was 2069 that the first landing on the moon was, but it's
1969.
Sorry, 1969. Thank you. Yeah, 2069.
I was like, whoa, Ardeet, you're from the future.
I'm from the future and simultaneously 150 years old. 1969, and the first base is expected to start around about 2034. So even in modern things, that's still 65 years. So I can imagine in the a couple of hundred years in the future, they'll probably look back and think they'll have somebody saying, wow, it took them 65 years from discovery till they made a base on the moon. So I thought that was an interesting little
modern parallel. Yeah,
parallel with what you brought up before at the start of the Two Ticks Town Talk.
No, it is a wild time difference of, we came, we saw, we left, and then 200 years later we came back and obviously very much established ourselves. The British colonists were very keen to hang around and weren't going anywhere anytime soon. So, and still haven't left. It is wild when you think about it in terms of that amount of time. Particularly with, I think, the modern moon landings is actually a really good really good idea to put it into perspective. One thing that's interesting about Streaky Bay is, at least currently, I didn't really have a good place to put this in, but I'll mention it here now, is the Streaky Bay golf course is like literally in the middle of town. So the main town is sort of wrapped around the bay, and it looks like the golf course was established probably quite long ago, before the town sort of developed more than it has. And as a result, it's only like 2 streets back from the beach and sort of again follows the town wrapped around the bay. Whereas most golf courses are kind of like on the periphery of town or whatever. But in this case, it's very much smack bang in the middle of town, almost as if the town was built around the golf course, which is, I don't know, it's just interesting. A bit of a quirk of town development. We'll see how that continues in the future. I'm not sure if it'll last forever. I feel like there might be a point where people just go, nah, you know what? We're building more houses here. You'll have to move your golf course. But for, at least for now. What would you say the population was? It is 2,436 as of the 2021
they got a while then.
I think so. I think there's plenty of space. So, and in the surrounding area, there's lots of farmland, lots of cereal grain. Mostly, it's sort of dominated by a patchwork of basically wheat and barley fields and smattering of other cereals. But yeah, no, look, interesting place, interesting sort of town. If you're from that area, I'd love to know what's the best spot to go when you come to this area. Because it looks like there's a lot of beautiful beaches. But where do the locals go? Give me the secret before I head down there. Let me know. I won't tell anyone, I promise. I won't say. Just let me know. I want to know the locals insider knowledge. All right. Australia can't easily reduce its military dependence on the US, but we might have a Canadian mitigation strategy. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney issued a stark warning to his address to the Australian Parliament. The post-war global order is breaking down, he said. Middle powers like Canada and Australia risk subordination due to their integration with great powers like the United States. Canada and Australia are strategic cousins with many commonalities and shared interests. Both countries span the breadth of continents, face the Pacific Ocean, and both are free markets, common law federations, founding members of the United Nations, Five Eyes partners, and extremely close US allies. And both are middle powers that are active in international institutions and have been the beneficiaries of the rules-based international order that they helped create. Yet when it comes to relationships with the United States, there are some significant differences. Australia has long had a fear of abandonment from the US, while Canada has historically been worried more about entrapment and the vulnerability of its sovereignty. Canadians' concerns stem from their long shared border with the US. If they are unable or unwilling to defend their own borders, the US very much will do that for them, whether they like it or not. Under successive prime ministers, however, Canada's defence spending has atrophied to the point where the US President Donald Trump humiliated Carney's predecessor with as calling him a mere governor of the 51st state. Canadians are polite, but that only goes so far. They were incensed, and their sense of honour was tarnished. Their sense of humour around Americans very much dried up pretty quickly. And the sentiment has been reinforced by Trump's arbitrary tariffs on Canada. Carney's middle power push needs to be viewed somewhat through that lens. And I do think there's a bit of spitefulness in some of his words and actions. And I totally get it. And quite frankly, I don't blame him for it. Though Canada is looking to diversify its partnerships with other middle powers, including Australia, it can't wean itself completely off trade with its neighbour. Nearly 80% of Canadian exports go to the US. So Canada's enduring interests remain closely intertwined with those of the US, even though it may not feel that way right now. While being similar in many ways, Australia's predicament is also quite different from Canada's. Prime Minister Albanese appears to understand this. Australia is a largely Anglo-European transplant nation on the edge of Asia, where a rising and authoritarian China is increasingly expanding its influence and interests. This has long made Australia a key strategic and military partner of the United States. This hasn't changed, even with Trump's America First rhetoric, shift in focus towards the Pacific Hemisphere, and his recent launching a new war in the Middle East. Trump isn't going to give up the Indo-Pacific region to China. He wants to successfully compete there, as the National Security Strategy in 2025 put it. This entails maintaining a robust military deterrence, with key regional allies doing more to help prevent a war. The US sees Australia as vitally important to this deterrence, and it's even more invested in Australia than probably most Australians realise. This isn't to say that there haven't been adjustments since Trump took power, however. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has articulated a new foreign policy based on the 4 R's: region, relationships, rules, and resilience. She's emphasized the US alliance being embedded with a broader web of relationships rather than standing alone. This reflects a more considered, less binary approach to the relationship. Australia is no longer seen as an independent or dependent ally. Rather, there is a middle ground for a middle power like Australia. This foreign policy acknowledges Australian resilience and reliance on US military and intelligence for deterrence, but it is more active in securing its own interests, particularly in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. Australia has long maintained a boutique defence force. A good defence force, but small. With the strong US alliance in place, Australia doesn't need to spend too much money on its defence or enact compulsory national service. It just needs to ensure its military is high-tech and interoperable with its allies, particularly well-trained. This model relies on trusted and ongoing access to US military hardware, warships, aircraft, tanks, air and space defense systems, and its software, the technology to operate these systems and build robust intelligence gathering and cyber defense capabilities as well. This involves collaborations with a range of US firms and the expansion of a national security innovation base in Australia. This forms part of the AUKUS agreement. I just want to touch on this for a second. If you have been listening to us talk about AUKUS all these years, or if this is the first time you're hearing about it and you don't know what it is, I would urge you, go and look it up. It's more than just submarines. It's a pretty significant defense treaty. Meanwhile,
probably, arguably one of the most significant defense treaties that Australia has signed onto in its history.
I would say it probably is. Yeah, I would say it probably is the most important defense treaty Australia's ever signed. Outside of, joining the United Nations and so on and so forth. But it's significant. And if you don't know the nitty-gritty, if you've just heard the headlines, AUKUS, and you think it's all about submarines, I think you should go and look at the cliff notes, because it's more than just that. Meanwhile, Australian sailors have been training in US naval facilities and are now crewing US nuclear-powered submarines. As we saw this last week, 3 Australian sailors were on board USS Minnesota, which sunk an Iranian frigate off the coast of Sri Lanka. All of this goes to show how closely Australia is tied with the US, particularly from a military technology, equipment, and intelligence standpoint. Finding alternatives to the US would be expensive, as would running a legacy systems in parallel for decades. The principal sources of alternative kit among them are South Korea, Japan, Sweden, and Germany. They're all US allies as well, and they rely on the US as well. Some pundits have speculated that a more independent Australian foreign and defence policy would cost upwards of 4 to 5% of GDP to sustain, and I would argue it would probably actually be more than that. So, how do we become more independent whilst simultaneously maintaining good relationships with the US and, let's be honest, not spending too much more money? John Blaxland, a professor of Strategic Defence Studies Centre at the Australian National University, has suggested a national institute to survey Australia's options and an incentivised with a voluntary scheme for community and national service. Basically, he's suggesting a think tank to bring the best minds together to suggest policy direction. He also suggests that tighter bonds with our neighbours. Specifically, he suggested a regional maritime cooperation forum starting with Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Indonesia and Malaysia that could collaborate on issues ranging from border security to intelligence. With so many shared interests and concerns, we can deepen ties with Canada, of course, as well. The joint statement by Carney and Albanese last week outlines a substantial range of opportunities for expanding cooperation in critical minerals, defence, security, and strengthening institutions. Australia is a middle power with small power pretensions. It must manage its enduring US alliance ties whilst bolstering other arrangements in the region and further beyond. Working closely with Canada could help ensure we can be a more confident, self-reliant regional leader, stepping forward in a crisis when others are reluctant. The upturned world order is an opportunity to do just that. And we've spoken previously about there are opportunities in crisis. And with Trump's sort of way of dealing with things, there's certainly quite a few crises seem to crop up frequently. And there is definitely opportunity there as long as we're willing to act on that. So how do you feel about the how deep our ties with the US are? And I mean, we've barely scratched the surface. They're way deeper than we have time to go into here. Do you think we should push for more independence this way? Is this a sovereignty thing? Put the Trump thing aside for a minute, because I know the Canadians are just particularly pissed off about that, and I get it. I see why. But if we put that aside for a second, do you think it's a good idea for Australia to just become more independent anyway? Or do you think our role is more as a regional power that still relies, with a bigger power behind us? Or is there some balance there?
Closest balance. I think there's a lot of room. There's room to do more than one thing. On the US side, we've said this before, but it's worth repeating. When you're looking at these large geopolitics, you've got to look beyond Trump. He obviously gets under the skin of a lot of people for very good reasons and a lot of things, but he is approaching the end of his second term. It'll move on to other people. And yes, no, I don't entertain that he's going to suddenly be a dictator for a third or more term. But yeah, he's doing his thing. He's an issue for another couple of years. I mean, he'll be behind the scenes like that, as the presidents often do. But you can't base a long-term policy, long-term defence decisions on just feeling about how you feel about whoever the current president is, and that it's not just a Trump thing, not all Australian leaders haven't always seen eye to eye with US leaders, but geopolitically, you can't afford to have such a narrow view. You got to, particularly take a leaf out of the Chinese government's point of way of viewing things and thinking, 10, 15, 30, 50 years into the future. So the other thing that is, people don't like to hear it, and you can have different arguments about definitions and all that, but basically the US is essentially an empire and it's the number one empire in the world. And if you're going to align yourself with someone, if you can align yourself with the one who's in charge, and I can hear people's thinking, well, no, you don't define it that way, and that, and it's on the fail, and what about all these bad things? Completely agree. There's a whole lot of arguments to that, but the bottom line in a lot of geopolitics is, what is the reality? And the reality is there's nothing at the moment to match the US military. There's nothing at the moment to match the US economy, and there's nothing at the moment to match the US's global political influence, and there's also nothing to match the US dollar at the moment. So they're the top dog. You can like it or not, but that's the reality of the situation. So there's a very good reason to be aligned with the person in charge, regardless of what you might think of them. The alignment with Canada, this is what I'm saying. I think you can do with both. I think, if you have got it from the US's point of view, I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine that they're happy to see some independence and some own internal strength within their allies. So whilst there might be a lot of diplomacy and words said out loud, an Australia that has strengthened ties with Canada is good for Australia and Canada, but Canada is integral to the security of the US. It's part of their defence system. I'm happy to be corrected on this, but my understanding is the second in charge in terms of the military of the nuclear missiles is a Canadian. And that's how it's meant to be. They're to the north. They form that sort of bulwark for the US. So to have a good relationship between, their bulwark to the north and us being the influence in the Pacific, I personally think that's probably a positive for the US. And I think those other, I can't remember the professor who proposed it, talking about that Pacific forum with us, Singapore, New Zealand, and I can't remember the other couple, but that, combining establishment of a power base in there, that's good for us. It's ultimately also going to be good for the US too, because they do have a say, and people cannot like the fact that when the US says jump on a number of things, it's prudent politically and geopolitically to at least give a little bit of a hop. That's just the reality on it. In terms of independence, and we've sort of mates of the podcast will have heard DK and I discuss different aspects of this before. We have both talked positively or acceptingly about moves that Australia's made towards independence, whether that be local arms manufacturing, missiles, work like that. So I am very much in favour of Australia being as independent as possible, up to the point where I think we should have entertained the idea of a nuclear weapon, but that's a discussion for another time. Who knows? Maybe that might even be a special episode when we throw one in later in the year. But I'm very much in favour of Australian having some military and power independence. I don't think we have enough at the moment. I don't think the Australian public is in the right headspace for it. Unfortunately, I see what gets discussed, what gets talked about. I'm yet to see a leader who I think is powerful enough to unite the nation in going down that route, because there's a cost to it. There's a social cost, there's a cultural cost, and there's a political cost to it. And I don't think either parties have got that, but that is where I'd like to see it actually. That is where would like to see us actually head in the longer term. So, bottom line is let's talk with Canada, let's talk with locally, but let's not forget the depth of our alliance with the US and the time frame we need to keep in mind for geopolitics. So what do you think of this proposal by Carney in Canada? What's your opinion on Australia becoming more independent, and what's your opinion on our relationship with the US?
I think we've sort of discussed this a number of times. As you mentioned, we both agree that Australia having a more sovereign capabilities is a good idea. That doesn't necessarily, and this is this tightrope that you've sort of mentioned. I don't think it's necessarily either or type situation. We can maintain a relationship with the US whilst also moving towards more sovereign capabilities. And actually, that can be beneficial to the US as well. We've spoken about the manufacturing of missiles here. We've spoken about the manufacturing of other supply chain components that the US can lean on in a major conflict as well. And from their point of view, from a US point of view, having diversification of munitions availability in the world is a great idea, quite frankly. And so I think from a at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, the United States is our greatest ally. They are heavily integrated into both our defense and intelligence services, as well as the broader economy, whether you like that or not. And I know a lot of Aussies don't particularly like that because of the US politics and US culture that comes over here and so on and so forth. But that's the reality. That's the world we live in. And I'd much rather spend time with cuddling up to our American cousins who culturally are very similar to us in a lot of ways. There are some differences, but the differences are not anywhere close to the similarities. We're so much more alike than I think most Aussies would like to admit, quite frankly. And I would much rather us continue that relationship than abandoning it because we don't like a certain politician or we don't like certain things about their culture and stuff like that. There's things about every culture you're not going to like, at the end of the day. So probably with the exception of maybe New Zealand, I think there's going to be parts of every sort of culture and that Aussies aren't going to like. That said, I think it is still important that Australia have sovereign capability. We are doing that. This government, to the credit, have really taken this seriously, where other governments haven't seemed to quite as much. And I think that's been really, really good. So thumbs up, elbow for that, and the push in that direction. The alliance with Papua New Guinea, the pending alliance with Indonesia, which I say pending, but it's basically a done deal, is also absolutely fantastic. Like, that's incredible. For securing our northern border, there's nothing better than those two alliances. Our northern border is secure now. In a way that it never has been before. And that makes me sleep very well at night. So credit where credit's due. But again, this is that independent sovereign capability. We organize that. And I think Australia can continue to be that regional superpower in the South Pacific. We can leverage our ability to communicate and understand the challenges and issues that face our South Pacific partners, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Fiji, Tuvalu, Nauru, so on and so forth. All of these Pacific Island nations we can appeal to in a way that the US really can't. And I think it comes down to a cultural thing. And also, to the US's detriment, they do have that title of global superpower. So whenever they walk into a room, people kind of roll their eyes and go, oh, here they are. They're going to come and push us around and so on and so forth. So I think from a realistic international standpoint, like international relations standpoint, I think the US is to their benefit of having someone like Australia on their side to be like, hey, can you go talk to these guys for us? Like, this is what we want to do. And we're happy to fund this program or whatever, but they're not happy with us for whatever reason. So maybe you can step into the ring. And also New Zealand has a role to play in that as well. So I think there's an important role to play that different to the Canadian thing. The Canada thing is much more complicated in their own way. You know, Canada does have a chip on their shoulder because of everything that Trump's done, and I get it. And I truly do. You know, the disrespect that he's shown them is pretty disgusting, quite frankly. And I know a lot of Americans don't like it as well. But again, that's just who he is. He's like that with a lot of people and a lot of stuff, right? And that's not great, quite frankly. Like, it's not good to treat your friends like that. That's not how you treat your friends. You know, we teach little kids that in school. You know, you treat your friends with respect and that kind of stuff. And yes, sometimes you need to tell your friends the hard truth. But, you know, I don't think this is the way to go and do it. He's a bully. That's what he is. That's who he is. And whether we like it or not isn't really relevant because he wasn't elected by Canadians and Australians. He was elected by Americans. And so we just have to deal with him as a result, and just like they have to deal with our leaders, and that's the world we live in, right? So, if you put that aside for a second, I think Canada, in a way, has had a bit of a rude wake-up call. And look, I don't want you to take this wrong, our Canadian listeners. I love you guys, like more than you probably realize. The Canadians are just like cold Aussies. There's snow Aussies. Like, yeah, we love you guys. We have a lot of shared history, a lot of shared culture in our own ways as well. We have a lot of time and respect for you guys. And at the same time, I think you've been very complacent with your defense spending, with your security and all of that, and just gone, the US will take care of it, NATO will deal with it, blah, blah, blah. And you've really let that just go unchecked. And I think you've come to realize that now of, hey, we probably actually need to spend some money here. The global order is changing, and it has been for a while. And I think people are really starting to wake up to that now. Thankfully, the Australian government, subsequent government, not just the new, this government, I shouldn't call them the new government because they've been in now for a term and a bit, but previous governments as well have invested in our defense because of the China question. It's kind of forced us to do something about it. Whereas I don't think that threat has really been there with Canada until recently. And now they've gone, oh crap, we probably need to do something about this. And I think the rest of NATO is much the same. I think the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Ukrainian war has very much woken up a lot of Europe to the threat of conflict. I think a lot of people thought wars were over. We didn't need to do this anymore. Like, it's, you know, that's not the world we live in. We need to wake up to it. I do think we need to walk that line, though, basically, is that fine line that we need to walk of being a major player in the South Pacific and into Southeast Asia. We need to have the sovereign capability of defending ourselves if we get cut off, because the reality is we're almost definitely going to be cut off, just like we were in World War II. You would have thought we would have learned that lesson then, but we friggin' haven't. And as a result, we need to be prepared. We need to be aware that a hot war is going to deplete our armories very, very quickly. And so we need to have that capability to rebuild those armories here in Australia and not rely on the US.
Yep.
Or others. And the US can also rely on us through things like AUKUS, through the Five Eyes Agreement, through the new munitions factories we're building, and so on and so forth. So I think there's this fine line. And actually, to her credit, I think Penny Wong has actually been really fantastic in this. I think she sort of gets it, and she's been pushing really, really hard to secure our northern borders. My biggest fear, I should say, with a conflict with China was that Darwin would be attacked through Indonesian airspace. I don't think there would be Chinese ships on the horizon. I think they would use probably their bomber aircraft and submarines, and they would launch cruise missiles at Darwin and basically knock out Darwin and the RAF base there, and essentially we would be not completely knocked out, but we would have a significant blow to our defense capability. Yeah, and as a result, our response time to whatever's kicked off this conflict, whether it be an invasion of Taiwan or something else, I think would be significant, because they could fly through the South China Sea, through parts of Indonesia, if the Indonesians allowed them to, or if we didn't have good terms with the Indonesians, they might not go looking, for those aircraft. That's changed now. Because of that alliance, Indonesia are aware of it. The vulnerability we have in that northern realm has basically been not solved, but certainly more secure than it was 12 months ago. And that is very, very much a huge benefit to our security long term. And so I think now the average Aussie probably doesn't really fully understand how beneficial these alliances are, but I hope to see in the future, I don't hope that anything ever happens, but if something happens, I think a lot of people will wake up and go, oh crap, these people deserve credit for what they've done here, because this is very much secured our northern border. But hopefully we'll never need to worry about it. But
hopefully.
I do think, again, shout out to John Blaxland, Professor of Strategic and Advanced Studies at the Australian National University. I think he's got some really good ideas. We've left a bunch of his stuff in the show notes about some of his ideas of what we can do in the future around think tanks and regional maritime cooperation forum, which I actually think is a really good idea anyway. But, whether that happens or not, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on. It's time for This Week in Australian History.
This week in Australian history, we're covering 6th to the 12th of March. March 6, 1788. Lieutenant Philip Gidley King takes formal possession of Norfolk Island. 1812, 2 Wesleyan Methodist classes were established in Sydney by Thomas Bowden and John Hosking, the beginning of Methodism in Australia. 1837, the Theatre Royal in Hobart opened, becoming Australia's oldest. Actually, that's a. Hang on. Theatre Royal in Hobart opened, becoming Australia's oldest continuously operating theatre and a key venue for performing arts in the colonial and modern eras. So just as I was reading it out, it opened, becoming Australia's oldest continuously operating theatre. It's just a funny turn of phrase that you can't open and be the oldest. Maybe that's my ADD. 1989, former National Safety Council of Australia boss John Friedrich is arrested in Western Australia on fraud charges related to a $237 million collapse involving fabricated loans and assets. There was exposed major corporate government failures and a whole lot of lengthy proceedings. He was just bottom line was he was an incredibly talented bullshit artist. He was a con man who was very well until he got caught. But yeah, it was amazing how much. I can't remember. I'm sure we dug into it a little bit before, and maybe we'll again in the future. But yeah, if you can't remember where we went, or you don't want to wait for it to happen in the future, look up John Friedrich if you haven't heard of him. Yeah, interesting situation it was.
March no justice was dealt out. He shot himself, I think.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. It didn't. Yeah.
That's what they told us, at least.
Yeah, that's what they told us. That's right. 2 to the back of the head. March 7th. It's a dud date. no major historical events from this that have any sort of great worth for us. So let's hope that March 7th gives us something in the future in a positive way. Not something horrible, but in a positive way. March 8th, on 1828, Australian postage stamps issued for the first time. That was in New South Wales. 1973, the Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub in Brisbane's Fortitude Valley was deliberately firebombed, killing 15 people through smoke inhalation and burns, and it's one of Australia's worst mass murders. March 9th, 1787, in Portsmouth, England, Lieutenant Ralph Clark begins the first of his diaries covering, actually, he'd be a lieutenant then if that's on the ships, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Lieutenant Ralph Clark begins the first of his diaries covering the voyage of the First Fleet and the early years of British settlement. 1909, Adelaide's new system of electric tramways is officially opened by the wife of the Premier, Thomas Price. 1851, in Australian Communist Party versus Commonwealth, the High Court of Australia holds that the federal parliament's attempts to ban the Communist Party of Australia is unconstitutional. And that was during the Cold War, so there was a lot of anti-communist feeling there. Some going to wouldn't have lost the biggest sleep over that, but that was what was correct constitutionally. So, yeah. 2000, Melbourne's Docklands Stadium is officially open, replacing Waverley Park as Victoria's second largest stadium and headquarters of the Australian Football League.
Yep. Marvel Stadium. It's a good
Marvel
it's a good
Stadium. That's right.
That's what it's called now. Yep.
Yeah, that's been. Had a couple. Was it Etihad Stadium at one stage, and
I think it was
Telstra stage. Yeah.
Yep. Now it's Marvel, and when I went there, this was a couple of years ago. I didn't realize it was like the superheroes Marvel. I just thought it was something else. And then when I got in there and I saw like the Incredible Hulk, I was like, oh no, it's that Marvel. I wasn't quite ready for that, but anyway.
Well, hell, where was Incredible Hulk?
Oh, it was just like
a seat next to him.
It was like
he was a big fan.
He was playing.
No,
it's like on the walls and stuff. There's all the Marvel characters and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it was surprising because I don't know. I didn't think it was.
What did you think it was?
I don't know. I just really didn't think.
Just brain farted. Yeah.
The American, entertainment companies was sponsoring a friggin' stadium in Melbourne, but. They did so, or they still do. Good stadium though. Good stadium.
Oh, it's a great stadium. Yeah. I think I've only been there. Well, at least once, maybe twice, but at least once, and I did think it was pretty impressive inside. I mean, we walked around it a number of times, but yeah. March 10th, 1908, Australians Douglas Mawson and Edgeworth David, accompanied by Ernest Shackleton and others, are the first people to scale Mount Erebus in Antarctica. And that would have been a bit chilly.
Yeah.
1931, the first Apex Club is formed in Geelong, Victoria, by three young men as a community service organisation for men aged 18 to 35, and then that later expanded nationally. 1946, an Australian National Airways DC-3 aircraft crashes near Hobart, killing 25. And in 1959, shall I ask you this? In 1959, the Australian population officially reaches what number? And it's it's a million number, but it's just rounded. 1959.
I'm going to say, if it's a nice round number, I'd say 5 million, but I don't think that's too low. So maybe 10, or is it like 8?
Yeah, no, 10.
Oh, 10.
Yeah, well done. Yeah. March 11th, 2001, the National Museum of Australia opens in Canberra. And March 12th, 1860, Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, was shot in the back by Henry James O'Farrell during a public picnic at Clontarf, Sydney, in Australia's first political assassination attempt. The Prince recovered. O'Farrell was executed. And it was fueled by anti-Irish sentiment and led to temporary restrictions on Irish immigration. 1913, Canberra is named by Lady Denman, an event celebrated in the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, on the third Monday in March as Canberra Day. 1921, Edith Cowan becomes the first woman elected to an Australian Parliament. And then finally, in 1936, Western Australia makes voting compulsory in state elections, and it was the first Australian jurisdiction to do so, aimed at boosting electoral participation, and that aligned with federal compulsory voting introduced earlier, and unsurprisingly, increased the turnout significantly. So I'm sure after that, the bureaucrats enjoyed a beer. And as the bureaucrats sip on their diet lemonade light beer shandies, we'll crack open a decent one and get into the Forex bottle top quiz this week. So for this week's quiz, we're going to go down a long road, 3 to be precise. So this quiz is about Australian roads and highways, and may possibly be a part 1. Just a couple of factoids I got. So we'll see how we go, but let's start with this one. The first one's a partial giveaway, given we're talking about Australian roads and highways. However, what's the longest national highway in the world, and how long is it?
It's the Australian M1 or A1 highway, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Highway 1, yep.
Yep. How long is it? Oh, bloody hell. I don't know. What I find interesting, though, is that every state calls their stretch of the highway something different. So, like, it's not, It doesn't have a national name. Oh, like, it is the M1 everywhere.
Stay tuned for question 2.
Oh, okay.
Keep going with that. It doesn't change the question at all. But
I think it's just interesting, right? That we all just call it in Queensland. It's the Bruce Highway, the mighty Bruce. But I actually don't know what it's called. Although I think it might be the Pacific Highway somewhere, but I'm not sure. How long is it? I don't know. It goes bloody. Oh, frick.
Well, it forms a loop around all of Australia. Yeah.
But, it does, but it also, I think it goes up to Darwin as well. So there is a couple of little hanger-on bits, a couple of frills on the edges, but it must be like, I don't know, 20,000 Ks or something? Oh, no, I don't know. I'm going to say 15,000 Ks. I have no idea if that's...
Well, correct. Yeah, I'm going to round that up and give it to you. 14,500 Ks.
Whoa.
So 9,000 miles. So,
wow.
Oh, wow. Good call.
That was just a straight up guess.
Wow. It was a good guess then. Hey,
honestly,
bonus
I thought
question.
It was very, very high, but there you go.
Yeah, it was obviously going to be high, but that was a bit tricky because you start to mentally do the loop around Australia and you're starting to think, 3,000 odd kilometres from Perth, but it's not a straight line, and you go round, and how many of those sort of length roads go? Yeah, so good guess. Good guess. And on that one bonus question, what's the only capital city it doesn't connect to?
Ooh. Is it? I want to say Hobart, but is this a trick question? Do they have part of their...
You know what? I should have said only mainland capital city it doesn't connect to. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, God, that was... Yeah, okay.
Ooh. Is it Canberra? Does it go to Canberra?
It is. In fact, I have got mainland down there. I just didn't really... Yeah, so it doesn't go through Canberra.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Question 2. Excluding the Highway 1 network, what is the longest single road in Australia? And this gets, you touched on it with the what the states call their own road, which is fair enough. You know, that's what they've got there. So what's the longest road in a single road in Australia?
Okay, I think there's 2 contenders for. Bloody hell! There's some long roads. So
yeah.
Okay, this is my thoughts here. From Brisbane to the Cape, that's a bloody long road. Or there's a road from, is it Adelaide all the way to Darwin? There's a road that goes that way, I'm pretty sure, as well. I don't know what that's called. But there's also like there's that road that goes from Brisbane through the guts, like Western Queensland, and then that links up and goes to Darwin. But I think that joins the one from Adelaide. I'm not sure though. There's also that road that goes from Perth to Port Hedland, I'm sure, as well. Or it might be Exmouth. Oh, I don't know. There's some bloody long roads in this country.
Or it might be further.
Oh, really? Well, the Nullarbor is part of the M1, isn't it? So
yeah.
So that's out. Or is it like Melbourne to Brisbane? I've been that inland road. I don't know what it's called.
Oh no, they're separate roads.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's one of the ones that gets this has got its own name and considered a separate road. Like you said, the Mighty Bruce.
It's the whole way.
Yeah.
Oh, I really don't know.
You were just about there with Western Australia. So it's the Great Northern Highway that runs from Wyndham down to Perth. So it's almost 3,200 kilometres long. So 2,000 miles. So yeah, it's the longest longest single road in Australia. So
wow,
yeah.
I never would have got that.
No. Well, I wouldn't have either. So it goes through a lot of the remote areas of the state, and it's mainly it's predominantly 2-lane single carriageway, but there's a couple of single lane bridges up in the Kimberley. So yeah, over there.
Wow.
And final question, where is Australia's longest straight road segment and how long is it?
Oh man, this is such a good question.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear where you go. You're possibly going to do the same as me.
This is such a tricky question because I want to say it's on the Nullarbor, but I don't know if this is a trick because I know there's that straight section of the Nullarbor, but I don't know if that's the longest straight road. I also have no idea how long it is. I think it's over 100 Ks, but I don't know. I've never driven it, but I've heard it's pretty hilarious because it feels surreal because you just keep going, apparently. But there's some really long straight roads up in the Territory too. I know there's a couple of sections there that are just just these impossibly straight roads that just go on and on and on and on for like an hour. You're just driving, you don't turn, you don't do nothing. Very boring. I'd actually imagine they'd be quite dangerous because they're so monotonous. And actually Western Queensland has a few, but I know there is quite a few towns along the way, so I don't think they're the longest, but I'm just going to have to go with the Nullarbor, and I'm going to say it's 100 Ks long just because I've heard that. I don't have any idea if that's close.
Good guess. So yeah, it's the Air Highway, which features the 90 miles straight, which is actually 146.6 kilometres without a single curve, crossing the Nullarbor plain between Baladonia and Kaiguna in WA. So, yep, you were correct. And I have been on that, and it's straight. But it's funny, you do drive along, and even though there's like on the map there's a gentle curve, you're still sort of looking off into the distance, and it still feels like it's straight. But you do get on that bit, and it's just it's just almost like a bit of an illusion.
Well, I mean, it would have to curve to a point because it's going around a globe, isn't it? So.
Oh, well, yeah. I suppose you're correct from that point of view. But yes. Well, okay. I suppose I suppose based on that logic, there's no straight road in the world.
Yeah.
Huh. Incidentally, the Saudi Arabia's got the record for the longest straight road segment in the world, which is 822 kilometres through the Rubba Kali Desert.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
510 miles just straight.
Wow.
Oh
my goodness.
Yeah, so that's
how boring.
That would be full on. Well, it depends how much you like. I mean, we talked about it before. There's something about that unrelenting scenery that has its appeal. But yeah, I think if you were crossing it regularly, the novelty might wear off in some places.
I love driving, but I hate like big, straight, long roads like that just because they're monotonous. It's boring. I want to do something else. Like I want to go up a mountain or something, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah. What a great bunch of questions.
I'll do a part 2 then.
Yeah. We've got some crazy roads here in Australia.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us for another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do to support the show is share it with a friend that you think might enjoy it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to tell your mum I love her.
Thank you, DK. And ironically, I have to bring the rubbish bin in tonight.